Good morning again, class. This is still Mrs. Politsky, and we're going to take a look at notes for Chapter 4, Section 3, which deal with the development of federalism. And you're going to need the Chapter 4, Section 3 guided reading. So if you don't have that, you might want to hand that out. Follow along and make sure that you have everything filled in. All right, we're going to take a look at state versus national rights. And if you remember a while back, we talked a little bit about the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist in the time leading up to the Constitutional Convention. And for the most part, Federalist and Anti-Federalist really are still kind of with us today. If you remember, the Anti-Federalists were really concerned about state rights and what was going to happen to their rights if they would have a strong and powerful federal government or a national government. And then you had those who were the Federalists who wanted a strong federal government because under the Articles of Confederation, they really weren't getting much done as a nation. So if you can kind of keep that in perspective as we go along, it might make things make more sense. We're going to take a look at state rights in this position. And just so you know, there are still people that would call themselves state rightists. Um, State rights, for the most part, these are people who favor state and local action for dealing with problems. And it's kind of their perspective that states created the national government and gave it only certain limited powers. And if you go back and you look at the 10th Amendment, the 10th Amendment kind of explains that as far as um, the limitations that the federal government has and the fact that anything that isn't really explicitly said or, as we would call it, um, expressed within the Constitution is actually left for the states to determine themselves. Okay? People who are state rightists, they really believe that the government should be closer to the people. And if it's at the state level, it is going to be closer to the people, and it's probably going to better reflect their wishes than the national government ever would. Okay, on the flip side, you have your nationalist, and they believe that the national government is not subordinate to the states, that it's always higher up, and that there are reserve powers that are delegated within the Constitution that have been given to the states that in turn limit the national government. They believe that the national government stands for all people, while the states only speak for only part of the people. Okay, and this is kind of, a battle line that still draws us today when you talk about politics. How much should the federal government be telling states what to do and what not to do? And, it can get over, some really heated topics that deal with morality. When you talk about how we look at, the life issue, whether or not the federal government can dictate, um, when it comes to like the Affordable Health Care Act, whether states should be a part of that and how much they should be involved as far as participants. All right, taking a look at the bottom portion. The bottom portion gets into talking about the growing of our national government and the fact that it has expanded over the years. The expansion of our national government powers are based on three major constitutional provisions. The war powers, the powers to regulate interstate commerce, and then finally the power to tax and spend. And if you look at your sheet here, we've got a little bit of that. We've got the power to wage war, the authority to regulate commerce, and the power to raise taxes and to spend that money. Okay, when you talk about the power to wage war, this is power over the economy and also power over the educational system. When you talk about war, war is not cheap, and thus it can have a major impact on the economy. To outfit a soldier, requires a lot of money, let alone outfitting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of soldiers to participate in war. You also need to look at, the jobs that might be vacated as a result of individuals going off to fight. We may need, to hire more individuals. And all of that has, some kind of turn on the economy. When you talk about the preparedness of our military, the educational system also is kind of there. Are we teaching our future sailors and soldiers the subjects that they need? Are they, physically fit? When you talk about physical education. So all that comes back to the educational system. When you talk about commerce power, okay, the power to regulate commerce or the power to regulate interstate commerce, this could include things like the production, the buying, the selling, and transporting of goods. But, some other things that might come in are the issues with discrimination. And I'm going to move my cursor there. Um, One example is the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And the wording within that act basically said that those businesses that are in our nation could not discriminate against individuals based on their color when it comes to things like travel. So, like interstate bus companies, like a Greyhound bus, or hotel chains, or restaurant chains, could not discriminate against customers based on race alone. And in a way, that impacts business throughout our country, not just in one little region of our country. Finally, the last power that we have here is the power to tax and spend, the taxing power of our government. And I'm going to move all of this here. This is the power over business. By heavily taxing dangerous products, the government makes it unprofitable to manufacture these items. When you talk about things that we have kind of over the years decided that are now dangerous, such as tobacco products, if they have a high excess tax on it or excise tax, individuals may choose not to use those. But it might also be a way of, regulating it as well. Powers over the states. Federal tax laws encourage states to set up their own unemployment insurance groups. Within those states, they kind of have the opportunity to determine the criteria for individuals as far as how long they stay on unemployment. Some states provide more time than others. State of Nebraska, I think you have roughly 1 year, and some of that funding does come from the federal government. A little portion of that comes from the state, and once that money has been used, then there is no more assistance. All of this comes under the 16th Amendment, which is the amendment to the Constitution that brought about the beginnings of the income tax. All right, well, that is all we have for today. Make sure that you have all of your notes. Thank you.